Hello and welcome to episode 40 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Xerxes, and I'm on a blood-soaked downward spiral to find who really took the cookie from the cookie jar. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
I'm Carl.
I'm Satinga.
I'm Kurt, Disco Alucard. On this podcast, we have 3 rules. Rule number 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule 2, you can nominate one game at a time via 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. Rule number 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated, just don't nominate games we've already ranked. You want to see the master list for yourself? Why don't you go check it out at bit.ly/47kgames. All right, our next game is Déjà Vu, which was nominated by @William D. Tucker. Very creative handle there, William D. Tucker. On Twitter, it was developed by ICOM Simulations, Inc. So it's one of those famed ICOM adventure games, published by Mindscape. First platform was the Apple Macintosh. It was published in 1985 at some point, probably circulated through various municipal Macintosh user groups or something like that. This is a... Was it their first? It's not the first ICOM game, right?
No, I think it is.
It's the first Mac Venture game.
Déjà Vu, Shadowgate, then Uninvited.
No, I thought Uninvited was second.
Yeah, no, Uninvited second.
Okay. Yeah,
Shadowgate third, and then Déjà Vu 2 as the fourth and final.
Shadowgate was the first one. Okay. So, yeah.
It was on the NES, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
So it's like, it's an adventure game. It's a point and click, but also like kind of click and drag kind of game too.
Mm-hmm. I love the interface in this game. You have no idea.
Interface is really...
It's so hot.
Real quick.
Really ahead of its time. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
slow down, Bob. Slow down. Let's finish the game summary before we jump into
Well, okay, so it's like a film noir adventure game. It is... I don't know whether it was literally made on HyperCard, but it seems like it was. It is basically like the big difference between this and other adventure games of the time is that you've got like windowed inventory systems. So you've got like a inventory window that has stuff in it. And as you grab it out of whatever room you're in, you can collect it and then you can drag it out. And it's really cool. It looks a lot like actually like, say like inventory in Diablo or other kind of dungeon hack games like that, where you have stuff that just takes up space. Although I don't think it actually takes up real space. No,
it doesn't take up real space. But something that this game does, it is a text adventure sort of by design, but instead of using text for the most part, you use a text phaser interface in 1985.
I should say that when I said that Maniac Mansion was the first adventure game to use a verb now interface, I was wrong, because I believe this might actually be the first game, and that's really something that's neat to see.
Well, we've got the authority on the subject here. Why don't we ask Kurt? Is this the first one?
I think we found out that the first game was actually called Enchanted Scepters, and I think that was 1983. Let me just double check that again. But there was definitely stuff that predated Déjà Vu, even though Déjà Vu was probably the first one anybody really remembers because it was kind of popular-ish.
Yeah, it was ported to a smegload of systems. Wow. The complete list of systems is like 8 different things this was ported to. This was ported to Japanese computers. That's how crazy the ports were for this game.
And that's one other thing I'd like to bring up very quickly. This is not like the NES version. There are a lot of differences, small and major, that we should probably go over, because we are discussing the Macintosh version.
Which Macintosh version is similar to most of the PC releases. There's a Windows release, which is quite similar. I think maybe the REST release is similar. I didn't double check that, but
and those versions are all quite playable today because those are the ones you can buy on Steam and stuff like that. They're usually pretty cheap, and every now and then they go on sale for like 99 cents.
The Steam ones get you the Mac and the Apple II GS versions, which are basically the same, but the 2GS version has color. Oh, looking at Enchanted Scepters, it's the first one that's point and click, but doesn't have verbs.
Personally, I think my favorite version of Déjà Vu might be the Windows 3.1 version, because it has the same sort of interface as the Macintosh version, but it has a nicer 256 color art that looks usually nicer than the actual Macintosh art, I would say.
And to contradict that point, I think the original Mac version looks the best because I love the early black and white Mac high pixel density
Really is cool.
dithering.
It's very
It really
cozy.
is cool.
Yeah, I just love the nostalgia that
There's a
old-timey
guy.
pieces
I think
evokes.
it's the Papers, Please guy is either finished a game or is working on a game that does that exact art style.
The Return of Obra Dinn, yes, Lucas Pope. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. But I guess we are not going to be reviewing that.
It's a very cool style, and I think that it does actually benefit the game because it gives it a noir feel for what the setting of the game is, and you play this very grungy black and white look. But if you want color and similar graphics, definitely the Windows release is pretty cool.
I mean, you can get this on the Game Boy Color of all things. So.
With its sequel.
It's really interesting because if played straight through, this game is less than 20 minutes long, and it's like, wow, you want to buy that on a cart?
I don't think you could beat this game 20 minutes on the walkthrough. It gets really difficult.
Yeah.
Well, if you
Even
know what
more-
you're doing, then you definitely could.
One thing real quick that makes it so much harder, you do not get continues in this game. If you die, you better have a save, because you cannot just respawn like you do in the NES version. Let's go ahead and summarize this, because I almost forgot.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Basically, you wake up in a bar bathroom with absolutely no idea who you are. Although I think the death screen completely spoils that your name is Ace Harding.
Not in this version, you just get creepy
Oops.
skulls.
Alright, well, that's the NES version in that case, sorry. Well, okay, then you are a mysterious guy who wakes up in a bar bathroom with no memory of what you are. You can't even remember what your own face is when you look in the mirror. But then
That's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, but then you go a couple rooms up in this completely empty bar, and you find there's a dead guy slumped over, and it becomes apparent that you've been framed for some sort of murder plot for nefarious purposes. So this game is essentially a murder mystery where you have to work with whatever clues you're given throughout the streets of Peoria. It takes place in Peoria, Illinois, of all places. It's a curious place to set a game in the 1930s. And you have to figure out who you are and who's trying to totally hose you over without getting killed or arrested, which will likely happen because, as Bob said, it's a pretty difficult game. I mean, you just have this jerk who keeps assaulting you on the street, and you can...
So you punch him in the face.
Yeah, but that only works 3 times. If you face him a 4th time, you're forced to give him a $20 bill, and that might be debilitating in the future. So, I don't know. Yeah, death is
Can you
pretty
actually,
common.
because I believe that you can't actually do anything with that 20. It literally exists to be given to that guy.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, I know that there are... that you can also purchase a gun at the gun shop, but I don't know if that's actually necessary to do so.
I just in no circumstance give away all your quarters, because you need those to pay for the taxi to go to different locations, because this game lets you get in a taxi and type locations that you are aware of, that the game... It's pretty easy, like, in terms of it really does tell you, like, it'll give you a slip of paper, and the slip of paper says, the crime is totally at 18 Fairweather and 16 Beltway. And you just, like, straight up just type that into the interface. It's like, cool. There we go.
Something I forgot to mention is that doesn't this game also have a time limit where, like, the drugs that you have, like, overwhelm you and you pass out and you lose if you take too long?
That is exclusive to the computer versions. They actually made it easier in the NES versions.
Uh-huh.
It is a pretty strict time limit to an extent. Yeah, they shot you up with something to give you amnesia. They shot you up with amnesia drug, and that's why you can't remember anything. And you have to get the counteracting drug, and if you fail to do that in time, you'll get...
Well, this game's
wiped out.
this game's more merciful than Darkseid, at least, but not unlike Darkseid, you have to pretty much know what you're doing, and, like, you have to keep dying and keep working your way through the game to figure out what to do here, what not to do here, so that you can basically do it efficiently in the least amount of moves to finally beat it. So, that's how they did things back then. You didn't have any guides spoiling everything. It was all a bunch of trial and error, taking notes, and that's old school right there, you know?
It very much has its roots in, like, text adventures. It's just with a graphical GUI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's something that I think is really important, is don't try and think of this, because when we talked about Maniac Mansion really feels like a precursor to point-and-click adventure games. It very much fills that sort of space. Whereas Déjà Vu this is the slight evolution of the text-based adventure, right up into having a a window on the side that lists the exits of the room, and it calls them exits, and you just double-click the different doors, because on the screen that you can actually see, you can't always see all of the exits.
Right.
So it's not even, like you actually have to interact with the other interfaces to do that. And there's no real interacting with other people. There's not really a conversation system or anything.
Except for
occasionally characters will pop up and they'll be like, hey, I'm going to punch you, or hey, I'm an alligator, I'm going to eat your face, or whatever. But you don't get to say, no, don't do that. You have to physically use an item to stop it.
That reminds me, you actually have to punch out a hooker before she shoots you. Was that considered controversial for its time, or
I think
she
you have the
wasn't a
option of
hooker in
also-
the Nintendo version. It's
Yeah,
just like
they-
a woman.
Yeah, we should say this version is a lot grittier. Like, for one thing, there's a lot more writing for everything, but there is so much stuff that you could just not get away with a Nintendo game in this.
Although there was, I recall in the Nintendo game, they still had like the lethal injection room or whatever it was. Like,
It was a lethal injection room, but like they changed all the syringes and all the drugs to like pills.
That's right. Oh my god, that came up with a couple of inconsistencies. I think it was just
we're
called
tying you down. Open your mouth. No, open your mouth. I said we're going to put some pills in your mouth. No.
I'm glad you said it in that voice, because I got to point out, for anyone that hasn't read it, the manual is written in 1930s gangster speak, and they fully commit to it.
Yeah.
Listen up, yous wise guys. You got to put it in the A drive, and it's like, what?
I
Sorry,
love your Australian gangster accent.
That was Australian
I love
gangster, which is a real gangster slang, and you can look it up. And yeah, there was Australian gangsters, and they spoke like that. But yeah, no, it has
Don't copy that floppy. See? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's great. It's a long manual, and it's written like that, which I really appreciate that they kept the theme, and the dialogue in the game is written like that too. Like
Yes,
a lot of
it
the
is.
text is
That
thematic.
was one of the creepiest parts when I was a kid is when you look in the mirror and it's just like a big question mark, comes up, I think. And
a
it's
large
like,
half face.
I don't even recognize that person. I know it must be me, but I was like, man, that is messed up.
Yeah, no, it starts out pretty intimidating, and I do think the
You
relative.
picked up in a bathroom stall, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think sort of like the lack of relative interaction does kind of make this game. I want to say gives a little bit of a horror element in a way, because it just feels like you're kind of being watched no matter where you go, like with this cosmic deadline, but like no one's there, so like something does feel creepy about how ghostly it is.
You do get this sense, and the game points it out a couple of times, like, oh, there's no one around. But you get this feeling that they must have written this game, and after they sort of played it and seen some reviews, they're like, yeah, this game was really creepy. We should make a horror game.
And that's where Uninvited came from, exactly.
It really feels like they were like, yeah, let's just make a horror game, and that's why there's no people around. But I think this game even has some cool stuff where you can get alternate or altered endings in this title, because you can shoot people, right, instead of punching them. And I think the police will arrest you for murdering people. I believe that later on in the game, you can actually, instead of stealing evidence to basically prove your innocence, you can straight up inject poison into the people that framed you, and then the police will arrest you when you go in for being a serial killer, essentially.
Yeah, you basically have...
Those are like alternate game overs, though. Like, to beat the game, you just need, 5 or 6 pieces of evidence, and then give it to the cops, and then walk in the door. And, if you got it right, then you win, right?
Yeah, it's basically, you dob yourself in with the evidence to clear your name, but don't dob yourself in with the stuff that proves you're guilty, like your gun, because I think you get in trouble, because they're like, why do you have that gun?
Wait, only killers have guns.
You're a private eye with a gun? That's suspicious.
I'd say this game is a lot harder than Uninvited and Shadowgate end up being, because those are more like traditional adventure game inventory puzzles. Here you gotta really think about all the evidence and exactly where it goes and how to deal with that, and it's a lot harder, I would say.
No, I gotta agree with you there. I think I've had the most trouble playing it since... I guess because it also feels somewhat more free roaming. I mean, it's not exactly a big game, but it felt like Uninvited and Shadowgate had a bit more structure to the mansion and the castle. Here you're just on the streets and you have these various places to drive around, so it's not really pointing you in as much direction. Once you get out of the bar, it's a little more free roaming. It's harder to know exactly where to go right away. So,
which I will say, in kind of the game's defense in some ways, the fact that it's kind of casually kills you isn't as big a deal because when you restart the game, you don't feel like you have to, I've got to go to that room, I got to get that key, I got to go all the way over there to the other half of the game and do this. No, it feels like, no, I just got to click this, click this, click this, click this. Okay, I'm back where I was. You know, it doesn't often feel like you're completely screwed over in that regard, which is...
Although I do have to chide this game for having a murder boat, where if you go too far in one direction on the street, you fall into an under construction hole and die. So that's not nice. I'll say that.
It's actually has worse than Murder Boat. There is a hole in the sewer where you can drop items where they'll be deleted forever. So you can deliberately or by accident be like, buy evidence, and that's it. You just made your game unwinnable. Good
old Sierra style like that.
So just for the people who haven't been listening to this podcast since, like, I don't know, how long ago do we, like 5 years ago?
Yeah,
probably when that episode was. Yeah, Murder Boat is our terminology for anything that will kill you immediately, but you have no way of knowing it until you do it.
That was April 2012, for those curious.
Oh my god.
I feel old now.
If you've been listening to us since then, I want to extend a personal thank you to you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Patreon.com/HG101.
Oh my god.
Yeah, of all the more talented podcasts out there, you chose us, and we thank you. Now give us some money.
My god, what's wrong with you?
But okay, so before we step off to rank this, I would like just to talk a little bit about more interface stuff that I think is really neat. So the game has a kind of, we've talked about the inventory a little bit. It actually has the option built into the game to sort your inventory and shuffle it out so it's nice and clean. You can actually highlight several items at once and drag them around to interact in the environment and stuff. If you need to, like, spend 3/4 on the cabbie all at once, you can actually drag all 3 at once, which is so nice. I don't think there's another, like, adventure game in existence where if you need to use more than one item, you can actually grab them all at once just like that and be like, okay, use them. And then it will do it, which I think is really, really neat. Sometimes the interface is a little bit confusing. Sometimes you'll be like, try and examine something, but you click it and then it won't work, and you'll try and operate it, and then you're actually supposed to operate it, then click it, but then click operate. Sometimes the system doesn't seem to quite follow the same logic all the time. But my favorite part about this game's interface is you can actually open the inventory of the gun, the revolver, and then you'll have your spent bullets, and you can take the spent bullets out of that and drop fresh bullets in, and that's how you load your gun in the game, which I think is just the coolest thing. Where would we like to place this one?
I'm thinking, I had some for this, above Blazing Lasers.
This is a tough one because the game is, I would say, let me put this into perspective for our younger listeners, probably everybody who's not as old as I am. Is like, this game is almost as old as graphical user interfaces in and of themselves. The idea of, like, having windowed interface systems and stuff like that's not normal in 1985. That was very new.
I want to make a bold statement and say this game is like the Myst of its time.
It pretty much is. I mean, you could have made Myst using the tools this game had available. It just wouldn't have looked like Myst, but I mean
that was the point of Myst. So
yeah, that kind of was. Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, it's you could have done that.
This game
kind
has
of
like
thing.
No sound. It has like a punch effect, and that's it.
Yeah, that is the hallmark of many HyperCard games. When I made HyperCard games as a kid, I would always use the system sounds that you knew that every Mac would have. So, like, there's a lot of boing, that kind of thing. That happened a lot. So. You could always call up the address of the system sounds, and you'd know it would be there. But I mean, that's an interesting thing. Is like somebody who had a computer it's like I see the application for this right away. Like the what you can do, what kind of game you could make with this it's interesting. I mean, that's just something to think about. I don't know. I mean, somebody would have done it sooner or later, but that's kind of cool. Like somebody had the vision to see, oh wow, you could make a cool, adventure game out of this. And
I mean, are we selling it short, like around the Blazing Lasers area, or is that a little low for one of the defining sort of major stepping stones of point and click and adventure games in general?
I'm okay moving it up.
Below Snatcher, and Snatcher, even though that's much more of a stereotypical Japanese adventure game, is a much more interesting story.
I want to say that this game, the thing interesting about this story is it's an amnesia plot, which actually is pretty good. Like, it actually works quite well.
Because it's short, I think. You're not spending a lot of time being like, who am I really?
No, I like it that it's like a big hook of the game is find out who you are, and you find out who you are within about, I don't know, 20 seconds. You're like, oh yeah, I'm probably that ace guy.
Oh yeah, I'm Ace. Yeah, I remember.
Portrait in the bar hall. Now that come to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just I gotta vote up any game where you wake up in a toilet stall. Like that to me is like one of the top things you can do in a game. Like that's
you know who wakes up in toilet stalls? Dogs Bauer.
Yeah, you know what? He would.
Okay, here's a question. Is waking up in a toilet stall better or worse than waking up in a dumpster, like in Full Throttle?
You think there was a call out to it, maybe?
It could have been. I got to imagine that the Mac Venture games had to have had some fans in the more forward-thinking adventure game designers. I feel like they kind of lack the sense of humor that you would get in the LucasArts games, but
it's kind of interesting how little humor they have, despite the fact that an alligator attacks you and you gorily shoot it in the face.
It is
it's not played for laughs. It's just there's an alligator, and if you don't kill it, it'll
dry sense of humor. I think.
It's
pretty typical from other text adventure games at the time. Like, wow, this deadly thing is happening. Too bad.
I just can't believe how good the artwork is in this game either. Like somebody just doing literally black and white stippling effects and stuff like that. It looks so good. It's really nice.
I mean, if you had had a Mac in 85, I think if you had shown someone this in 85, they'd be like, whoa,
oh, yeah.
Like, wow.
No, this is about time. Like I had Mac Paint and could print out certificates, like world's coolest kid and stuff like that, with a little and it blew people's minds all up and down the block, because it was you could do this kind of thing. And it's just
it's great.
Unbelievable.
You could do that in Déjà Vu too. If you finish it, you get an official certificate of I've beaten Déjà Vu that you can print out.
So a friend of mine, here's my last HyperCard story. So a friend of mine made a game where you could, it was supposed to be an adventure kind of game, basically like this, but it's a sci-fi thing or something, and you were patrolling some wasteland, and then there was a command tower that would just be watching you all the time. At any point, you could just fire a couple rounds into the command tower, and then you would get a game over, and then there'd be a certificate that would print out automatically and be you wanted dead or alive or something like that. It's it would, you didn't have a choice. If your printer was hooked up, it would just print. It was really funny.
What did it print?
I can't remember if it was a death warrant or something for you, or it probably wasn't that.
That would freak you out, if your printer just started printing. You're now wanted dead or alive. What the hell?
Something like that. Yeah, something like you are fired or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but my favorite part is you'd shoot the tower, and then a little spray paint can style smoke cloud would start drifting up from the top, and then the printer would fire up. So these are back when they had dot matrix printers too. So with the little
loud aggressive machines. They were.
Sorry.
Okay, so that didn't really get us any further into whether we want to put this higher than Snatcher, I guess, which was the question.
I don't know.
It's just think 1985. That's all I'm saying. Just think 1985.
Yeah,
it's a pretty big deal.
It is. That is the criteria we're sort of smashing here. I mean, there's Tex Murphy a bit higher at what I believe is 57.
They're both similarly impressive, I'd say, in terms of technology.
But and then in between that we got a bunch of great games. We're already in our great game area where we've got great stuff like Street Fighter 3 and Bang IO and Golden Axe. I mean, This game it's pretty cool, and it's quite impressive how well it holds up. There's not too much in this game that's kind of, oh, that's bull crap, you don't, no, it's like, that's fine. You can save when you want. It doesn't do too many things that are unfair.
I'm going to bump it up a few more, see what anyone thinks about Between Devil's Crush and Outrun 2006.
That sounds like more like where I'd put it.
Okay.
So I'll back you up that one. That's 3.
Okay.
Okie dokes.
If Kurt's cool with that, I'm cool with it.
Bam! Hit it in the dark.
Podcast is this anyway. Whatever. Okay, our next game is Gradius 2, Gopher no Yabo, or Vulcan Venture, as it was known outside of Japan. It was nominated by @CrowTRobot.
Now, is that Trace Ballou or Bill Corbett?
Crow. I don't know. It was developed and published by Konami. It came out for the arcade, Famicom, ported to just about everything. Well, not everything. But
it wasn't quite as prolific as Gradius, which I'm pretty sure has been on every single machine.
And which we'll have to get into, like the whole Salamander Life Force type thing happening too. Earliest release date territory is March 24th, 1988 in Japan. What can we say? Is it really pronounced Gopher?
Yeah, it's Gopher.
Okay.
What a bad guy. I'm surprised it's just not like an actual gopher with like large teeth that's the enemy commander or whatever. No, it's some sort of like giant skinless brainhead. Or, well, okay, I guess that's a spoiler, but if you know anything about Gradius and like giant immobile bosses at the end are...
You know anything about shoot 'em ups? Giant skinless brain thing? I mean, how many monsters does that describe, really?
Yeah, no, it's kind of par for the course, really. But where do we start in with? Well, I keep saying Gradius. I know a lot of people say Gradius instead. I'm going to try and go with Gradius for the Vox Populi's preference in this case. But
I mean, the easiest way to think about it is, you don't pronounce it like Gladius. You pronounce it Gladius, whatever.
Because it's supposed to be a name of that Roman sword type.
Yes. So that's the easiest way.
Gladius,
so
okay.
What this actually is, even though this is called Gradius 2, it's kind of a not quite sequel to not quite sequel. So it's kind of Gradius 3-ish or 4 or whatever.
It is basically Gradius 2. It's just that in between the first Gradius and this one, there was Salamander / Life Force.
Yeah, and that's, despite having a different name, it is basically considered part of the series, but with the caveat that they alternate between horizontal and vertical levels, whereas Gradius proper is all horizontal throughout. So I guess Salamander is like Gradius 1.5?
I'm pretty sure they do.
They're basically completely different games that was sort of retroactively made Gradius. Like, they always had the Big Viper as the main ship. And it had some sort of similar weapons like the options and all that sort of stuff. But if you play the first Gradius and the arcade version of, especially Salamander, like, they play a lot differently.
Yeah, especially if the fact that, like, the weapons in Salamander are all out in the open. It doesn't have the Gradius power bar, not until the NES port of Life Force. But I guess we'll talk more about those if and when they get ranked, because we mostly want to focus on Gradius 2 in this case.
One point real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I think they actually do consider a Life Force / Salamander a Gradius game, because if you look at the intro, they kind of go through a brief timeline, and they do show Life Force in that.
It's hiding right in this. Even when they released Gradius 2, they were clearly intending for that to take place in whatever timeline the games take place in. Also, because
canonically, I mean, they put a lot of effort into this, especially in the MSX games. Yes, they're together, and like, especially the Nintendo Life Force feels more like a Gradius game, but I still think it's more of a, like, Gradius does very specific things, which Salamander doesn't.
Yeah.
And that makes Salamander a better game.
Hey, wait. The real question to ask is Parodius considered canon too?
Sure.
I hope
consider
so.
Parodius canon to every game.
Yeah, it's
all games. All games are part of the Gradius.
Yeah, according to Odo Medius, every Konami game is canon up until itself, even the ones that contradict each other.
Yeah, that's fair.
But so what you have is, because Gradius came out in 1985, and then 3 long years later, Gradius 2 comes out correct. So
I gotta say, I keep forgetting this game is 1988 because holy crap, it was pretty graphically advanced for its time.
Konami's, especially arcade board, was just on fire. They could not only looks but sounds. Like, it just looks and sounds incredible.
Yeah, and then Zexix was only 3 years later. A game like that from '91 is like I mean, well, Konami has always given a lot of graphical detail to pretty much everything they make. Graphic and sound, they always knock it out of the park. So this game's a real aesthetic banquet, no kidding. I mean, you have this sort of the gigantic suns and fire dragons in the first level, and the second one is totally H.R. Giger as all hell. And yeah, just a lot of really fantastic looking areas.
And it has a horizontal scrolling in the levels. You know, the game auto scrolls left to right, but vertically scrolls up and down.
Right.
With the player control, you know, you go up, the screen goes up.
Gradius did that too, though. The original one.
Yeah.
It did?
But okay, I'd say Gradius 2 is the game that defines, like, what it is to be a Gradius game.
Yeah, exactly. Gradius 3 is basically just Gradius 2 again.
But stupidly hard.
Yeah, and same for 4, except the graphics don't look as good. 5 definitely took on some different paradigms, but that was co-developed by Treasure.
Yeah, well, Gaiden and 5 kind of go off in their own direction, and that's why I think those are better games. But as far as, like, the Gradius-y, like, this is the most Gradius you can get.
Yes, definitely.
So we're going from Gradius, which I guess most people are familiar with.
Wait.
What separates 2 from
Hang
1?
on. Now you guys are all pronouncing it Gradius, and I'm trying to keep it as Gradius. What gives?
It doesn't matter.
Gradius.
All right, we all ping-pong back and forth between them, audience, so trying to get too flustered at us.
Tell me what the difference is between 1 and 2. Why should we care about 2 over 1?
Okay, so 2, the first one, it looks like a modern game, kind of. It has really well-designed sprite graphics, but there are lots of things that age it, also, specifically that the boss is the same on almost every level.
Gradius 2 has actual bosses for 1, and I think their levels are also a lot more involved. Like, you know, every level in the first game did stick to fairly definable gimmick, but the levels still all kind of look the same up until like the 5th or 6th, but every level in 2 looks very completely different, and they each have a major gimmick to deal with. Like, the second one has you blasting through all this corroded alien garb while these spidery things from pods rain down on you. I think those were taken right from Contra, those spider pod thingies.
They definitely, at least the 8-bit port, they're basically the same sprites.
Yeah, and then level 3 is just crowded with all these crystals that you have to keep shooting until they break up, and you have to avoid them. And then the 4th level is sort of a Gradius tradition, where it's basically a homage to the very first level of the first game, but then, like, volcanoes explode, and you have to try and shoot or avoid all the rocks that flow from there. And yeah, every stage does something differently and looks very distinctive, unlike the first game where it kind of meshed together.
Well, the first game, I mean, it's been a while since I played it, but it's there's like this cavern level, and then what's the second level? Is that the level with the pink dots? And then another cavern level.
Yeah,
then there's the Moai level. But
yeah.
I mean, they're just kind of like, they hadn't really developed the themes that would make distinct in the later games. And Gradius 2 was the first game that, you know, like, here's the fire stage, here's the crystal stage,
the speed level,
et cetera, et cetera. And then the speed up zone was another big thing where it would just make you go really, really fast, and you'd have to dive through the different different tunnels before you crash into the walls. Like, everything of that was set in Gradius 2, and everything that Parodius parodies, a lot of it started in Gradius 2.
Exactly. Yeah, and the fact that also it wasn't as varied as in later games, but you did have some variance with your weapon configuration at the beginning. Whether you
the 4 different weapon configs. That's one of the gameplay-wise, one of the biggest differences.
I mean, the Ripple laser originally came from Salamander, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that carried over in the various missiles, whether your double is at an angle or behind. Like I said, future games would have
the spread bomb missile, which is easily my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, that one does actual damage, so, yeah, it's a good thing to have. But, yeah, there really is a good deal of variety and challenge to this game. But maybe the challenge might be a little too much. I mean, we're talking specifically about the arcade version, so...
Yeah, the arcade is... the first time I played this game was actually the PlayStation 1 Deluxe port, because that was before MAME and all that sort of stuff. And it's a pretty good port, but there's... the Gradius syndrome, I guess, is what you actually call it.
Let Bob talk about that. He's got a grudge against it.
Everybody has a grudge against it. Even somebody like me who loves the series.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, real quick, I've been pretty quiet about this game because I'm not really a huge fan of it. And there's one reason which Kurt very distinctly described as Gradius syndrome, and that's the fact that if you die once, you lose all your power-ups. And from there, it's this constant, you just hit a brick wall, you can't make any more progress. You might as well just start over entirely if you die even once, because you're not going to be able to get anywhere. And that basically just kills the game for me. I just can't enjoy it at all.
Now, see, sometimes, depending on the game, it's a problem in a lot of them, but depending on the game, that's kind of the fun. If you're fully powered up, the game almost becomes too easy. But if you make a mistake, that's when you get, tossed back to a checkpoint with barely any power-ups. But being able to just be really resourceful with what you can get, and you really optimize your pattern. Okay, this comes up here. This is a weapon I'm going to try. This technique didn't work. I'm going to try getting an option. Or I'm going to try to get as far as I can to get a shield. And when you actually make it, is really gratifying. The problem is that's not Gradius 2. My strongest memory of it is getting to one of the last levels of the game, and the scenery starts coming off on the top and the bottom, and they start flying at you. And at that point, there is not enough power-ups for you to do anything, and you were just screwed. I must have continued dozens and dozens of time to get past it, and it just was not possible. And at that point, I said, okay, that was it. And that's also one of the main reasons why I like the PC Engine port a little bit better. Because in addition to being a little bit easier, when you run out of... When you get killed in the arcade version, you just get sent back to a checkpoint. And it doesn't matter if you have any lives left or whatever. It basically doesn't matter. In the PC Engine version, if you run out of lives, you restart the stage, which sounds like it would be harder, but it allows you to power up so you're not as often stuck in those situations where you're screwed.
Yeah, the irony is that it's a design kind of fairer. It feels like it would be, but... you actually, unlike almost every game ever, you don't want to be booted back to a checkpoint. You do want to be booted to where the game starts balanced. I think most of the levels are relatively balanced if you play them from the start. But
because each Gradius level starts with a navigation segment where it's just this generic enemies that's very easy to get power-ups. They're rarely very difficult. So keeping that in mind, you can at least get yourself in some sort of shape for when the level actually starts.
Hey, Kurt, I checked that bit, the flying floor and ceiling bit that you mentioned on video. I just found out that comes just before the infamous gun wall boss. So how does anyone expect you to beat that? Yeah, another Gradius quote-unquote tradition is that before you reach the really super easy, not actual boss, final boss, you have to fight just a huge wall of guns that will murder your face. And then after that, you have to survive this large invincible thing with lots of legs or a wheel or whatever. And you have to somehow...
Spider robot is just,
it's a really... The finale is almost too much. Even I have to admit that. It's where I actually prefer the NES, rather Famicom version, because it has a little bit less... I think it's a little shorter than the arcade version, but it's also a lot easier, and it kind of remixes things somewhat, so that's almost a very fresh game on its own right. Both versions are certainly worth playing, but I would say that the Famicom version is a lot more accommodating and merciful. But that's not the one we're talking about or rankings, so...
Well, it's similar to, the difference between Super Contra, the arcade game, and Super C, the NES game.
Hey, that's a good comparison.
Most of the levels are pretty similar. There's some changes. There's some extra bosses in the Famicom game. The soundtrack's almost entirely different outside of sharing a few songs.
That's a good point. A lot of the...
It's a lot easier, but if you aren't a shoot 'em up pro, then I think it's at a good level.
Definitely. Like, it's still a challenge, but it's not stomping your face into pulp like the arcade one is. Yeah. Although, I will say that the arcade version of Gradius 2 is not the arcade version of Gradius 3. That game is like walking a giant stretch of coal from the Atlantic Ocean to Mars or whatever. It's horrible. Oh my god.
Given the fact that you can't continue in that game, like, game is basically worthless in its like
the SNES version is way superior, but we don't want to be talking the entire series. I'm sorry, I love Gradius a lot, so it's a little hard for me to just keep it to one game. It's kind of like I almost want to say not necessarily the genesis of all shmups, but shoot 'em ups, but definitely the sort of flagship series of the genre as a whole, where you can go back to say,
the defining, like, horizontal shoot 'em up. That and R-Type, but Gradius came first, so.
Yeah, and I still think that Gradius is still Gradius, I don't even know anymore. It's still relatively easier than R-Type. That game wants to kill you forever. In my opinion, well, it depends on which R-Type. I'm sorry, I'm just going all over the place. I'm not sure if...
You need to slow down, because we've still got to talk about Gradius 2. Would you say that any enduring popularity of sort of Gradius 2 is more related to the ports rather than the arcade game? Because we basically were assigned the arcade game for this rank, I believe. And
good question.
The arcade game feels kind of too unfair and too money-grubbing for... as far as even a regular arcade game goes. You know, it's very, very punishing. It's pretty frustrating. And I don't really... You have all these options, you know, it provides you with, like, you can choose all these different ship things, but you barely get to use them, because if you die halfway through the stage, that's it. You're not getting the power-ups back, and you're probably going to get wiped again and again and again. And I feel like maybe the console games that kind of rebalance the difficulty ensured that Gradius 2 would actually be kind of well-regarded and popular, because
there's not that
arcade
many...
really seems nicher.
There's not that many ports of it really that change much. It's not like the first Gradius game. Like, the Famicom game, like we said, changed a lot. But as far as the other ones, like the PC Engine one, outside of reducing the difficulty and adding an extra level, is pretty close. Yeah. The PS1 version is almost identical. The PSP version, which is the first version that actually came out in North America, weirdly, is almost identical outside of the fact that you can resurrect at any checkpoint you've previously got to. So, just taking away that barrier makes it a much more playable game. But again, if you're going just by arcade rules, I think it is probably too difficult to really enjoy, but there are still lots of cool things you could get just by putting in one credit.
Yeah, I mean, the graphics are great, the soundtrack's fantastic, the power-ups do feel really badass when you do have them, although a problem with the arcade is that you're not able to pause the game and input the Konami code to instantly get everything. But, I do have to ultimately concede. It's really, in many ways, it's a rather exquisite game, but is it a fun one? Well, I hate to admit when challenge really gets in the way of a game being fun, but this is one of those instances, I'm not gonna lie. So, that's gonna make it a little tricky to rank. If we wanted to rank it, like, I'm not sure if anyone else had anything to say about Gradius 2.
When it comes to ranking, I don't think I would put it above R-Type. Because R-Type is also pretty tough, but I feel like it's a little more manageable if you don't have power-ups, because at least there you have the charge shot.
Well, the thing about R-Type...
put it below R-Type a little bit.
And especially, if we were doing Gradius 1, I think Seniority would bump it probably above R-Type for kind of throwing a lot of the defining features out there. But when it comes to it, R-Type understood that it was really hard, and so they were like, okay, well, when you die, you'll reset the stage. I know that doesn't sound fair, but you'll be able to actually get through the stage because you'll actually, learn the patterns and you'll be able to get through it. Whereas Gradius 2 is like, they'll just, I don't know, quit and come back or something, because that's what the arcade games seem to want you to do. It's just... Yeah,
they didn't really care. They just wanted your money. Like, in the hardcore shoot 'em up contingent, their solution to that is, well, just don't die. Like, they want to one-up anyway. So the
No.
fact that you restart with nothing
Cal,
like doesn't
you
matter.
laugh, but these people are dead effing.
No, I know they're
like,
dead
gorilla
serious. I just
serious.
I love the. It's always when you have like the to counter criticism, the get good. Like that's always like the greatest sort of concession of okay, but so you're saying it's not good, basically.
Okay, but we're ranking this for normal people, correct? I'm sorry.
If we're ranking this for normal people, it has to go below R type. That's
yeah, I will agree with you
reality.
on that. How far below R type? Like, what I was immediately eyeing was between Descent and Age of Empires 2, or should it go a little bit lower? I don't know.
Why those games? Like, what's the next lowest? Shoot 'em up. I mean, there's Blazing Lasers.
We try not to make we try not to make shmup or like game clusters in our ranking list.
I keep complaining about this, but we keep doing it anyway, which frustrates me.
I know.
So.
We just try not to. We have Ikaruga actually. That's number 51 at the moment.
I think Ikaruga is better than Gradius 2.
I do too.
Ooh, well,
I also think Blazing Lasers is better.
Well, the next game is UN Squadron. God damn you, Cal, you son of a...
Hello, UN Squadron. Happy to see you here.
I love that game and no one else does. God damn it. Okay.
All right, how about between Tex Murphy and Quirk? Because I just feel like putting Quirk below, putting Gradius below Quirk is just a little too embarrassing.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with Quirk. That's a great game, actually.
I do like Quirk, but I like Gradius 2 more. Evil a game though it is, there's a lot to like aesthetically about it, and it did trend set a lot for the series to come for several games down the line. So,
so what I think about Gradius 2 is that it improved on Gradius, but I think that they also just sort of looked at Gradius's problems, went, they're not problems, they'll deal with it. And
yeah, that's an arcade game. Like, they don't really care whether it's balanced. They just care about whether you get their money.
So I think it's pretty cool, just above Quark. You know, it's not too low, but it's not super high, and I think that's pretty generous. But I think it's good.
Okay.
I think like something like Blazing Lasers has a much easier time being, considered good because it came out later. It has just a bunch of crap going on the screen, whereas Gradius 2 had to work with a little bit less and try and eke out a solid game. And it was a horizontal shmup, which I think are a little harder to make than vertical scrollers. They just seem to come out easier.
Okay. So I'm happy between Pandora Directive and Quirk. Anyone else have anything to say?
Works for me.
That does it.
All right.
Xerxes has been sequestered into his hyperbaric oxygen chamber, so I am in charge of this recording for The Fabulous Wonder and the Secret of Life, the Universe, and Everything, a game for the Commodore 64 from 1983. We don't know the month, and I doubt anyone alive does, except maybe its developer, Alan G. Osborne. The game was nominated by @Jinx Tengu, and the actual game itself was published by Games Machine Ltd., who published about, 6 to 8 games that are all pretty much as good as Fabulous Wonder, which is why they're not around anymore. Would anyone like to kick off why Wonder is so fabulous?
Yes, please. Let me go ahead and start by summarizing it. You are some guy in a spaceship, just some generic human. You can put in your name, that's about all the customization you get. This alien shows up and tells you to do a thing for him. You can either keep playing the game, or you can say no and die. And that pretty much describes every choice in this game. What this alien wants you to do is go down this nearby planet and find this woman named Wanda, because she has the secret of life, the universe, and everything, and apparently Douglas Adams just does not care at all. So.
I was just going to say, a sidebar, that's a phrase that comes from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and was in fact the name of the third book of that series, which was published close around, I think, just before this game was released, but being a nerd for that series, that's really all I have to contribute. So continue, Bob.
I don't know if he was the kind of guy that would have sued over that kind of thing.
Probably not, I had to say.
I mean, even way back in 1983, references to Hitchhiker's Guide were just nerd things that nerds did.
Yeah.
You know, that was
Well,
not seen as inappropriate or old hat.
Well, he should have sued for how bad this game is, but I'm getting ahead of ourselves, so
Okay.
Continue.
So the first thing you do once you get down this planet is you have to play this mini game to get enough money to actually leave this office you're in. And this mini game is this really horribly slow kind of basically you move the cursor left and right and try to avoid these bat heads, I guess they are, and pick up money. And it just takes forever because the screen just will not stop spawning bat heads just en masse. Just very rarely spawns the actual icons you have to pick up. And should you lose, you get kicked out of the planet and you basically die.
Basically, anything in this game will end with, and you die. Like, there's very little in this game that doesn't kill you at the end, which is often, if you're not a very good programmer, you'll just game over the player immediately after anything, because that way you don't have to worry about contingencies or keeping things in memory. It's very easy to just be, nope, start again. So once you manage to get through this minigame, which I know Bob managed to, you get to go to a bunch of different buildings, all of which kind of just kill you, except for one. And no one wants to talk about this.
Yeah,
I know.
I'll do my best. Okay, so there's no documented proof of this game ever having been beaten. Am I correct?
If you go on Lemon 64, like, the game is written in BASIC, so you can just look right into its code.
Oh.
And according to the people who went and did that, there is no way to beat this game.
This game is literally unbeatable. That is correct, and that is why no one will ever finish it.
Anything you do will just eventually just lead to your death, which means either starting over or just getting kicked back to the prompt.
So this is just a troll game, but it's sold for actual money, correct?
It's sold for actual money with fairly nice box art, quite pleasant looking box art with, I believe, the titular Wanda on the front.
Wow, what a racket! Like, that is total charlatan bullshit to the nines. I'm actually impressed. It's a scam almost. Like, who wants to buy a game that they can't actually beat?
Well, 1983 on the Commodore 64, you were not beating games. There were very few games that people would actually get to the end of.
I mean, Monty on the Run is technically impossible, but it has an ending. Even if you cheat to get there, it has an ending. This, from
what I've seen from reading some people's opinions of this game, it wasn't. People who played this way back when it came out were like, yeah, I liked it. I had fun with it. It was it's an interesting little thing. And I think that part of what made this interesting is it's actually a kind of cool setting. I realize that it's very, 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 very basic, but it is, you're in space and then you go to space buildings and space bars, and there's a kind of inference that there's more going on than there is until you crack open the code and you're just like, oh, it's
I guess
there's nothing there.
I guess it technically beats Space Quest to the punch, so it has an advantage of time there, but
the thing is, I guess you can make a lot of excuses for this game and why it is, but I mean, Zork came out 3 years commercially before this game. I mean, that has to count for something.
This game reminded me of when I was 13 years old and learning BASIC and a big fan of Douglas Adams, this would be something I would make to amuse myself, maybe torture my parents' little brother with. But otherwise, under normal circumstances, would just rot on a disc somewhere. But since all these companies were just soliciting, not donations, but contract work from people, I'm sure this guy made this game for himself, found someone to sell it to, and they sold it. And that's pretty much the whole story.
Yeah, you'd almost be certain they would be send us your game and we'll pay you £20.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they didn't overheat your computer, they didn't care what they sold. It was something just that they could put on the shelves and people would pay money for, presumably.
Yeah, there were a lot
Yeah,
less regulations for game production back then. It was almost the Wild
regulations.
West. Or I guess if there were even any, I don't know. I mean, that's what led to the
This is
Atari
basically a
crash.
Douglas Adams fan game, and I mean, this is not an obscure thing. I mean,
Yeah.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game, which what year did that come out? Did that come out before or after this?
Let me check.
I think it may have been after if this is 83, but I mean, that was no obscure thing. So it's pretty brazen. Like, it's not just the life and universe and everything. Like, there are tons of references to all sorts of stuff from the series. Like, there's like Zaphod something or other's name of one of the buildings you go into.
1984, if anyone's curious. So I guess there's some leeway there.
Yeah, so they actually beat the Hitchhiker's game out to the market.
And that was an extremely well-selling game.
Yeah, it was also an incredibly brutal one, but, it had structure. It followed the plot of the book almost to the letter, even if no one could probably beat it.
It was quite brutal because it was quite clever and required a lot of lateral thinking.
Exactly. But it was actually beatable. So,
So, yeah, Fabulous Wonder has a couple of things. It has a mini game or two. There's a card game. It's not blackjack. If it was, I'd actually be pretty impressed. It's a higher, lower gambling game. Not a lot else in there, to be honest. There's not even any sort of graphics of Wonder or any of the... you just get like a couple of blocks for buildings. You don't actually get any sort of characters presented on the screen in any way. Not even like little pixel blocks that like, that's a character. No, there's nothing.
Well, while it has just a very higher inkling of Yi graphics to it, this just basically is a text adventure except for the mini-gamey bits, right? And
yeah,
it's a simple text adventure too.
It's really simple in every way. And our opinion is definitely that this was almost certainly someone was young, made programmed up something, because this guy released several games. A couple of his games are the exact same game, repackaged with a different graphic or two, so that's not quite sure about that. But clearly someone who was just learning to program and thought, hey, I like Hitchhiker's Guide, I'm going to slap something together. And then, for whatever reason, it ended up being sold on shelves. And that's the game we've gotten. And I think the fact that this game was written in BASIC was actually might have been quite a positive to it, because some people that bought this, I think they cracked open the game and they made changes to some of the mini games and added little bits and pieces to it, which I think is quite helpful in that period of time for other people trying to learn to program. This is subtly a accidental aid in terms of making people interested in learning to code at the time.
I'm actually surprised that there was like actual art for this. Like, was this a British game or an American game?
I was pretty sure it was British. It was most common for products. A lot of them were British.
There's like, because the computer I had growing up, other than the Atari, which had games still on the shelves, but we also had an Apple II later on. And a lot of the games you would get from just hobbyists, you just get at a computer show where they just have rows and rows and rows of discs with X game on there. And that was just hobbyist stuff. Like, getting distribution from that was not terribly difficult. So I can imagine, just somebody doing that for fun. But to actually get it published is kind of impressive, I think, even though they were just picking up whatever they could.
Yeah, this one is a little odd. Some of his other games, some of them approach actually being games. So I'm not quite sure if maybe they picked up his other games and he just gave them like all the games that he had, some sort of deal. Maybe like, yeah, I made a couple of arcade games and stuff, and here's Fabulous Wonder as well. And they're like, cool, we'll publish it all. We don't care. It's a little hard to find the story of this. I think only Alan G. Osborne himself would be able to tell you what was going on.
We got to track this guy down.
If anyone knows Alan G. Osborne, because I tried to find him, but you can't really, because it's a fairly common name, so it's quite difficult to find the Alan G. Osborne who produced these games. And we actually streamed all the games that he made, including Condor, which has
it's our Condor.
Right? Yes, our Condor. What a great. Got great box art of like a man chasing a condor around.
Everything else he made is just this very simplistic arcade game, which are fun for about 5 minutes, but Wanda is
more fun than you'll ever get at Fabulous Wonder.
I gotta rank this, and I gotta level with you. I think we might have a new bottom here. like below X-Men.
Yeah,
wow.
It's definitely a low-scoring game.
Like, X-Men has a point. Caverns of Kafka has an ending. This is just kind of pointless and kind of...
Hey, Caverns of Kafka, I would, that tried a hell of a lot. I don't care if it didn't work all the way around, it was trying. This game doesn't even feel like it's trying. There's an item in this game that you can get that lets you basically, if you lose, you can reset to a slightly further previous part of the game. And that's all the item does. And it costs you a significant amount of money to buy it, money that you could use to spend on not finishing the game. So it's crazy that this thing is just so... It's like he just fell asleep. He's like cramming it, like he promised them like a copy of Fabulous Wonder, and then it was the night before. And he's like, crap! I gotta finish this game. I'm just gonna finish, and that's it. And they ran with whatever code was on the disc that arrived on them. So
I'm going to pitch a sort of hot, loaded question here. Is the Fabulous Wanda even a game?
Well, I mean, it's not a good one. But...
other than being finishable.
It does have mini games. I mean, that would have to qualify it.
Oh, you can interact with it, so...
All right, so I guess it ranks above Crazy Bus at least, but that's
barely.
It's its own special thing. I won't necessarily complain about throwing this one down to the very bottom. I guess we should kind of make a fair case. I mean, Bob already did kind of lay things out, but I remember I wanted to push for Super Monkey Daiboken to be worse than X-Men several episodes ago, and yet that somehow rated higher, so... Like, is Wanda just so bad that it's kind of amusing, or is it just, like, flatly just a total waste of time, or...
The problem with Wanda is it doesn't have enough non-substance to actually find enjoyable. Because, Super Monkey Daiboken, for as bad as it is, it's got lots of stuff going on. It's quite a long game. It actually takes like 30 minutes or an hour to get through if you know vaguely what you're doing. There's graphics, there's battle systems, there's some like the game's map is actually a map of China. It has all these things that someone at some point cared. They thought, we're actually publishing a game, so let's try and make a game. Whereas Wonder is probably a programming student or a young programmer who's just, I like Hitchhiker's Guide, bet, and then that was published.
The thing is, there's like some type-in program that got tossed around like a BBS or some such back then that might have been forgivable, but this is a game that you buy off the shelf with your money, and that makes it a lot harder to forgive. It's really the
paying for it that I think makes this game bad.
That's a good point, yeah. That's kind of why I was leaning towards when I was thinking. I mean, it was sold for money when it really shouldn't have been. I mean, I gotta say, if this were like a shareware demo of what could have been a much larger and more thoughtful game, then, I'd certainly go for it. But it's like, no, this is basically nothing. It was pretty much nothing back then, and it's less than nothing nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, back then, this is in a totally different caliber than, like, almost anything on this list. Like, it's just somebody screwing around, more or less, versus, like, X-Men, which is a terribly done game. Like, this doesn't have any real ambitions to it, which is fine. I mean, a lot of the games back then didn't really. It was just, like, something goofy somebody did to amuse themselves.
What I think is about X-Men is a really, really, really poorly put together product. At some point, someone was like, we're going to make this and sell it. And that Wanda doesn't have that element. It doesn't have people should be able to finish my game. There's, it's not that like Wonder has an ending that was accidentally disconnected somehow in the code. Like it was just like there was a typo or something that it didn't execute properly, or he went in and changed a number and it broke the game. No, it just doesn't exist. That you get the game is just like there's nothing. You can't get the secret to the life. There's nothing there. You meet Wanda and then she says get out, and then you lose the game, and that's it. Like that's I mean, maybe it's a joke. Like, it could be a huge meta joke in that regard, because the game does have a line. It does say that the last person to find out the meaning of the life from Wanda died, or their head exploded, or something. So maybe it's a huge meta joke that you can't learn the meaning of life from the game, but you had to pay for the privilege of getting that meta joke, and the rest of the game doesn't kind of make up for that. So.
Does anybody know what this game actually retailed for? Because we're talking about how like this costs money, but was it like a lot? Was it like a $5 like?
I'm pretty sure
thing?
it was a discount title. I don't believe it was a full price one.
Well, however much, it was still paying.
It's still too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a quick question. Does anyone have an idea if there were like any magazine reviews of this game at the time?
Oh, crap! I should have done my research on that.
I think there was at least one that did not score it very favorably. While we wait, I can give you the German title. Die Schafwunder und das Geshässmins des Lebens uns.
So the game was translated into another language?
Yeah, apparently it was available in German.
Yeah, balls. I
Okay,
can't.
I'm not seeing any magazine reviews.
Yeah,
So.
this is something where I think a Guru Larry would be able to help us out, but yeah, maybe we'll ask him if we interact with him soon. But well, as far as us ranking this game,
Look, no one's going to say this game is good. No one's going to bump this game high.
I'm not going to speak for. I'm not going to put a cherry on a giant turd sundae. This is just. Yeah.
What I know is you can buy this game online kind of at the moment for I think like £5 or whatever, you know.
Is it on eBay? Can I buy it right now?
It was on a website that I was just sort of scrolling around, you know, like a retro game site. It was like, yeah, you can buy it, whatever.
Huh.
But no, you could buy it. You could find this game online if you really wanted to buy it for some reason. I wouldn't, but you could. And so, yeah, it's not like this is a, you know, it's definitely sold for money.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like £4, and then shipped it's going to be like £10. I could have this on my shelf next to Psycho Soldier.
Kurt, do you really want to, though? Do you really
Well,
want
I mean,
to?
we've talked about it, so it's now part of gaming history.
Yeah, but so, all right, look, we've gotten way off track. I don't know what our edit is going to do except strangle us here. But
I would say this game is probably the worst. At the same time, I feel bad saying it that way because, like, just barring the fact that it was commercially done, like, you could look at any other, like, magazine type-in program at the time, and it wouldn't be much better. And I would feel, like, bad saying that, like, this is an objectively terrible game. Well, it's just something some guy did, like, cheaply, even if it was released commercially versus, again, Super Monkey Daiboken, which people worked on and is, like, just awful. But at the same time, like, I would definitely not want to play this ever.
It's a gaming artifact, and I think we've said, like, you know, putting something at the very bottom of the list is also a sort of interesting indictment of a title. Like, why is it at the bottom? You know, how do you end up at the bottom of a list of games? And we're not putting. I wouldn't put Wanda any higher. I would put it at the bottom, and I think it's mostly because I think X-Men. You know, you could play that game and probably get some fun out of it if you rented it on a weekend. I think whatever money you would put into Wanda would probably not feel satisfactory. You'd have been better off at the time going to the arcade with your £4 or £5 or whatever, I don't know, like £2, it doesn't matter, and playing arcade games for like the 30 minutes or whatever you would have gotten out of it. And that's really the main selling point here is like this game is a game that you're actively worse off for having owned at the time.
Or you could have copied that floppy, so...
I feel that might have been why this game got a reputation, is probably people just swapped it around. I don't think that many people bought it.
Yeah, no, that sounds accurate. Yeah, so, worst game ever until further notice?
I look forward to seeing a game that is worse than this one.
Me too.
No.
Me too.
Now everyone's going to try to...
Open the floodgates! Oh, jeez.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at Crow T Robot, at William D. Tucker, and at Jinx Tingu on Twitter for nominating those games. Thanks as well to those of you we haven't gotten to yet. We hope to get to you as soon as we can. And thanks to my lovely co-hosts and compatriots, and to our editor, Jeff Rude, our theme song composer, Miteki, our technical assistant and video editor, Bobinator, and of course, thanks to the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101, by subscribing to the HG101 YouTube channel, and by following at GCINX and at HG_101 on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or we'll use our warp drive to go back in time before you didn't do it. Until next week, keep keeping it real.